Initially, I wanted to call the title of the talk In Praise of Failure, because I don't really feel any right or reason to stand up before you talking about my journey as if it's a picture of success whatsoever. It's several steps in a row of, not real much significance to anyone apart from myself and those around me. But success is not a straight line, and yet we so often think it is. The philosopher Kierkegaard says that you can only understand life backwards, but you must live it forwards. At the moment, I'm in a really interesting phase of life. It's fascinating, exciting, but incredibly tiring. The business that we've been running for the last 7 years is getting to a great stage. We've raised a couple of rounds of venture finance, got offices in New York and London and Chicago. We're really racing after success. There's, great things happening as we apply artificial intelligence to the major marketing teams at big businesses like Kia and Virgin Media and Sky. But that isn't the thing that gets me really tired, because recently I had a young daughter and a young son, and they keep me up every single night, and that's the most exciting and tiring thing about my life at the moment. In fact, my wife and I, every time we go to bed, we don't say to each other good night anymore, we say good luck. I'm being totally serious. And yet I love getting up and going to work because I work with a fascinating group of people, almost 40 staff across those different offices now. And I love the fact that I'm never the smartest guy in the room. We've got a wonderful group of staff from technology backgrounds and sales and marketing backgrounds, and they're always willing to wake up in the morning and run through brick walls in order to solve all of the myriad of different challenges and failures we face every single day. So I was thinking about this topic of progress and about how we compare ourselves against really 4 different personas in our life. Firstly, we compare ourselves against our ideal self. We compare ourselves against our own plan for our lives. And this can be positive or detrimental depending on kind of your psyche and how you believe yourself and how you will turn out. I can remember many times looking back at my New Year's resolutions a year later in utter despondency and depression because they were so high and unrealistic and I didn't achieve any of them. Secondly, we look at our friends and family. Fortunately, I was blessed to grow up in a wonderfully stable family with wonderful parents, a wonderful family, and I've got a great group of friends from a whole range of backgrounds and nationalities, from my university and college and from church and from all the businesses I've been involved with. I love that process, but we get to the point where we start finding people that we compete and compare against. I can remember the first time when I was at university. I was 19, I was studying in America, and I met someone who was 18 and got to be good friends with him, and then found out that he was a year younger than me and already had a marketing agency that was turning over millions in the States with fantastic big-name brands. And instead of being his biggest cheerleader, I went back to my dorm room and moped. It depressed me. I thought, this is crisis time. I'm 19 and I still haven't done what he's done. And it's utter stupidity and immaturity when I look at it now. And yet that was my reaction in the moment because I was competing against my own sense of worth. And he had already beaten me at that game whilst being younger than me. Thirdly, we compare ourselves with people we see from afar. Historically, this would be textbooks and biographies, but nowadays it's often people we see on TV. If you want to be a singer, there's X Factor to compete with. If you want to be a businessman, there's Dragon's Den. If you want to juggle knives and do the can-can, there's Britain's Got Talent. But all these things, we find ourselves competing against the 15 minutes of fame. It's a snapshot of someone's life, whereas actually we miss the fact that there's a movie that's playing on in the background that describes a richer story. And finally, I found now myself competing sometimes against fictional characters, caricatures of real life. It might be hyper-reality TV where people are actually making themselves up for the camera, and we think it's normal, we compare ourselves against them, or maybe it's characters in movies and TV shows. I was looking at a list of the most famous people ever. And of course, you've got Plato and Aristotle and Copernicus and Vivaldi and all these wonderful painters, thinkers, dreamers. But then when you take the view of who is famous now, actually the people who beat them to it are pop stars and rock stars and sports stars. And that's great. I'm not in any way diminishing what they're achieving in their life. But what is more interesting, that on that same list you find Darth Vader and Batman, Jack Bauer, and coming in at number 84, Borat. Now, if I compare myself with Borat, I can come into a real easy sense of complacency and superiority about my cultural awareness. And yet, if I compare myself with Jack Bauer, I'm going to be continually in this vein of frustration and inferiority, insecurity and fear. And fear is a really interesting word there, because making decisions through my life, I've always confronted myself with this question: what's the worst that can happen? And it sounds a really negative way of looking at life. What's the worst that can happen? But actually, it's very freeing, because what you do when you ask that question is you actually start to understand the consequences that could occur. And fear is based in uncertainty. Fear is based in the unknown. And when you ask that question, you start to explore what actually could go wrong. And it yields some really interesting conclusions. So if I think about my journey just over the last 10 years, it's been one of lots of missteps and lots of failures that have just serendipitously led to other interesting experiences. When I was at school, I wanted to be a graphics designer. So I went into work experience until I found out that there was no way I could do that because I was a rubbish drawer. I wanted to be an architect, so I went and did some more work experience until I found out that actually I hated AutoCAD and I didn't have the detail or focus to be a good architect. I had this what's the worst that can happen mentality when I applied for a scholarship with Deloitte Consulting, one of the big four in London. And I was very fortunate to get that place, but I turned up in the office that first day and was surrounded by these other 15 people that had been selected from thousands, and I was feeling completely inferior. They all came back from very well-off backgrounds, from great private schools, and I was there out of Exeter College and thought, I can't compete with this. My first day on the job was interviewing the CEO of a big software company in London, asking for 45 minutes about his depreciation policies and his fixed asset register. I don't know if there's any non-accountants in the room, but those words are as confusing to me now as they were back then. I didn't know the questions I was asking, let alone the answers he was giving me. And yet you learn that the consequence actually isn't that bad. You get out of it alive. But I wasn't going to be an accountant. So I went to university, full of confidence and full of enthusiasm about starting a business, because I tried these other things and they hadn't really worked out. So in my first term, in a fit of 19-year-old arrogance, decided to start a fashion label. Two straight 18-year-old guys with no clue whatsoever about fashion. It's not a really good stance to go from, and yet we had some fun with it. We worked incredibly hard. It was top-end women's wear. We were selling in boutiques down in the southwest of England, crowdsourcing designs from designers from London College of Fashion and Birmingham Institute. It was a really, really good business model, but the trouble was we were running it. And we were working hard, sleeping 4 hours a day, working through every lecture, working through every night. We had some great times there, but in our second year of university, we were served notice and had to go to court because someone was suing us. One of our biggest buyers was suing us because of wrongful sizing. The truth behind it was they were going out of business, and they wanted to try and claim some money back. And every time I drive through Bodmin now, I shudder, and I see the sign for Bodmin County Court where we had to drive down and defend ourselves against this bunch of solicitors to try and claw back some of the student debt we'd invested in this business. During my university holidays, I went back to work for Deloitte Consulting in technology, media, and telecoms, and had some great fun, but learned that I did not want to be a management consultant. And went on and explored a few other things at university, eventually landing on web design, because when we did the fashion label, the one thing we did right was a great website. So we learned from that, and I can remember us thinking, who we are, professionals, going out to work, forget the lectures for today. We went off to win a contract with a local school to do their website, and got off the bus at the wrong stop. I can remember traipsing across this muddy field, holding up our trousers so we wouldn't arrive with cow pats smothered all up our legs. And we won the contract. I remember we got paid £200 for that website. It was wonderful. And that emerged into something that was quite interesting. My business partner took that away and took that ahead and built a fantastic business out of it. But I was never going to be a web designer. We tried some other things through university, and eventually I came to this decision point where my university period, that 3 years, was over. And I had to make a decision whether I was going to go back to the jobs that I'd been comfortable with before uni and during uni at Deloitte or other companies that were similar, something very safe and challenging and a great career, or whether I was going to actually continue with this journey I'd been on. Those first few years were really hard. I was living with my parents at home. Every time I had to go to a meeting in London, we didn't have any money, so I'd get on the bus at 4 a.m., get in at 9 a.m., do a full day's work. The cheap bus coming back to Exeter would be the 10 p.m. that would get me in at 2 a.m. the next morning, ready for another day of work. I can remember one time being called up by my business partner and a friend who were doing meetings in London, and they'd missed the last bus home and they're going to have to sleep there. They didn't have any money. So they're just informing me that they'd managed to find some cardboard from a local school and would be sleeping rough. You never know how warm the Circle Line is at 5 a.m. after you've spent a night rough in London. And we've had some real fun with this, but it's been a completely mixed roller coaster. When we first raised our round of venture capital finance, 3 days beforehand, we had a £80,000 bill at the end of the month and £1,000 in the bank account. And constantly we've got to deal with these pressures. Because when I started off, it was all about competing against my own sense of aspiration, competing against my own dream. Then I got married, and suddenly there was someone else I had to share that journey with. And then as the business has grown, that has to be tempered with the responsibility of now almost 40 staff and their livelihoods depending on what we do and the decisions we make. And now I've got kids. Suddenly, my greatest motivator, my greatest judge of success and progress is whether my kids are going to see me as a good dad when they're older. That's much more important than who I see on TV or what some friends I met at uni might think. There's this overriding sense that life and progress and success is about the journey, not about the end point. When I was studying in America, we used to go on road trips every single weekend. And I'm sure if you've been on road trips, you'll echo the same sentiment, that you never remember the destination you got to or the time you got there or the speed you traveled. I remember skidding off the road in Vermont on the black ice, or I remember taking a big detour to go and wake up with the sunset in Virginia Beach, or stopping in Philadelphia to help someone who had just had a car wreck. The journey is much more important than that end goal you celebrate at the end. So I really encourage you to make sure you get out of your comfort zone, have the courage to try stuff, because what's the worst that could happen? Have the humility to fail and fail and fail, and have the persistence to just keep on trying. Thank you.